Well, welcome everybody to our first webinar of 2021, our first legal webinar in partnership with the team at New Business Community Law Clinic. My name is Sandra Vidrio, and I will be helping you guys with the opening remarks. And so today's topic is going to be an overview as to the different legal entities to start a for-profit business. And our team and Bill Kell, he will also be, who is our presenter for today, will also be sharing information as to updates, legal updates for the year 2021. So with that being said, I want to remind everyone to please, let's use the chat box feature to send in your questions throughout the presentation, as we will be having a Q&A at the end. So if you're accessing Zoom, if this is your first time, you select the chat box. If you're using a computer, you have to select the chat box icon at the bottom, send in your questions. And if you're using a tablet or a mobile device, you just simply select more on your device and then you select chat, and you can send reactions, send us, top your questions for today's presentation. So there's some instructions right there. And these webinars are brought to you in part, thank you to our following companies that allow us to bring these weekly webinars to our small business community here in the Central Valley. So I would like to start by saying thank you to Bank of America, Comcast, Bank of the West, Chevron, FHL Bank, San Francisco, Donna G. Sales, Wells Fargo, Tri-Counties Bank, JP Morgan Chase and Company, and Union Bank for your support towards our organization. This is the agenda for today. Sandra Vidrio, and our presenter is going to be Bill Cal, who is the clinic director at New Business Community Law Clinic. And after the presentation, we will be having a Q&A session. For those of you that is your first time hearing about the foundation, we are a team of 6 that is here to help you out through your business development process, your business expansion plans. So reach out to our team. We have some of our programs that we have available is our virtual technical assistance. If you're looking for specific resources, or perhaps you're looking for a microloan, or you're looking for a small business grant, please contact us at 559-222-8705. We also have our weekly webinars. And so we love when we hear of topics of interest, because then that makes us able to make sure that we're catering to the needs of our small business community. So please give us a phone call. As mentioned, our focus is helping our small businesses, startup businesses, our entrepreneurs of the Central Valley, empowering them and giving them the tools for their success in their business. And you can also visit check out our website, but also follow us on social media to keep up to date with our upcoming events and also important information that could benefit your business. And if you want to view previous recordings of other webinars that have taken place in the year 2020, feel free to visit our YouTube account. You will find a lot of great content there. And with that short introduction, I will now like to introduce Bill Cal, who will be doing the presentation for today. So Bill.
All right. Well, thank you, Sandra, a lot. Let me put up I have screen sharing authority, I suppose. Good. Very good. Here we go. And I got my PowerPoint up here. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the first workshop in 2021. Hope for a better year here. Let me get to the start here. And by the way, yes, I am Bill Kell. I'm one of the 3 attorneys at the New Business Community Law Clinic out of Berkeley Law. And we do have regular office hours to help you individually if you have such a need. Those are Mondays and Wednesdays, 11 to 2. You can sign up on our website. I have the link on the last page here, but it's basically www.law.berkeley.edu/NBCLC for New Business Community Law Clinic. There you can go sign up for office hours there, and also find out about other resources that we have available, like our online legal library for entrepreneurs that you can access 24/7. It's called ollieLegal.com. Has a lot of good information there for folks trying to start a business. All right, well, let's look at the agenda. Oh, by the way, you always have to say this at the beginning. This is not substitute for legal advice. This is general information I'm giving you here. Of course, if you want legal advice, just come to us and we'll see what we can do. And today's agenda. So first, we're going to do a legal update, and that would be about both government programs for COVID-affected businesses, but also just generally new laws that are out there affecting small businesses that you should know about. And then we're going to roll right into overview of how to form a for-profit business in California. Well, also in Delaware if you want to do that. But generally, we're going to just give you the sense, the idea of how relatively easy it is to start a for-profit business and protect your business with those kinds of legal liability shield and other benefits. Well, let's get started. So as to government programs, one thing you should know is that most of the federal programs that were funded last spring continue to be funded. There are a few changes here and there, but basically you're talking about on the Fed side, the Paycheck Protection Plan, the PPP is what it's generally known as, the Economic Injury Disaster Loans, the EIDLs, a couple other sort of boutique, I shouldn't use to call it that. I'd say some more used by less people, the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant for like museums and theaters and stuff, and then other relief for people who do like exporting and federal contracting and bridge loans and things like that. Oh, looks like I should bring somebody in from the waiting room there. Okay, and so that's on the federal side. Then on the state side, you should know that there is this new California Small Business Relief Grants that just got announced. The application process actually halted 2 days ago, but they're going to have a second round starting in February. So you should definitely look out for those. Those are grants. And then the counties, you should also know, one of the things they do besides paying attention to all of the sort of COVID health and safety requirements that businesses have to follow, they're the ones who institute these commercial lease eviction moratoriums. They've been given the power by Governor Newsom to do that. And so we'll talk about those as well, because that might be helpful to you if you're having trouble paying your lease during this time. And again, do feel free to jump in on the chat. I'm not going to look at it while I'm talking because I want to make sure we get through the whole thing, but I'll definitely take those questions one at a time, starting after we finish. Okay. All right. Well, let's go to the next slide here. Maybe you knew about the federal Paycheck Protection Plan. Okay. Well, the SBA has started to accept new applications, both for first-time PPP loans and second-time PPP loans. Second-time loans are on the same base general terms as the first loans, but they are targeted a little bit more to the 300 or less employee businesses there. You can get these now through what they call community development financing institutions. I think actually FAHF is one of those, but generally you go through the SBA's lender match service here that you can use. And just plug this into your browser, and then they'll get some information of where you are, and then they can match you with an SBA lender. Soon you'll be able to apply through just any SBA approved lender, which again, I think is FAHF as well. Now you can use this for payroll, benefits, all kinds of different things. They've added even a few more things that you can use it for, certain supplier related costs and operations costs. You do have to show this 25% reduction in your gross receipts between the quarters of 2019 and 2020, or now it'll be first quarter 2021. And these are the kinds of maximum loans that you can get, up to $2 million. So anyway, a program you should be taking a look at. Some of this is potentially forgivable. We'll talk about that in a minute. Oops, where did it go? Wrong way. Here we go. Here's the loan forgiveness part. So you should just know that the first draw PPP loans are potentially forgivable if during the 8 to 24 week period that you're using the money, employee and compensation levels are maintained, proceeds are spent on payroll, at least 60% of proceeds are spent on payroll. And what you want to do is apply for that forgiveness once all those loan proceeds you want to get forgiven have been used. Certainly make that that application before the maturity date of the loan there. And your PPP lender is the one they have the forms that are needed to get that forgiveness there. Now the EIDL loans, these used to be forgivable. There were these things called EIDL advance grants, but those are no longer available. These are just loans, and they're 30-year loans at different terms, fixed rate terms there, you can see. It is deferred, payments are deferred for 1 year. You do have to have some collateral if your loan is more than 25K. Again, same kind of broad uses of these for different expenses. Your unsecured loan amount can't be more than 150K. And again, use the lender match to help you get to one of these EIDLs there. And then there's all these other sort of hybrid federal programs here for the shuttered venues. Again, these are like theaters, museums. There's these express or bridge loans, so that if you're like applying to an EIDL and you need money right now, there's like, you could get this 25K quick loan through SBA approved express lenders. That'll help you get over to the EIDL, and then the EIDL proceeds would tend to pay that bridge loan off there. Then you've got SBA debt relief. If you've already got an SBA loan and you're having trouble paying it, then there's a significant amount of flexibility that they're going to be bringing to this, extensions, adjustments. I don't know if forgiveness goes with that, but you should definitely check with your lender. If you're doing exports, there's some specific loans for working capital or international trade to keep that going, knowing that if that dries up, you might not get it again. And then, of course, if you have a federal contract, you're a contractor to the feds, then there's also these kinds of extensions or adjustments if you haven't been able to perform or complete those contracts because of COVID. All right, well, so those are the federal programs. Here's that California Small Business Relief Fund. It was just announced at the beginning of December. Pretty significant amount, $500 million. Grants are 5K to 25K. These are grants, okay? And you should know that the first application period just closed, 2 days ago. But those are all going to be, there's no like rolling, it's going to run out of money and you better get in it quickly. It's just all of the applications are reviewed and pretty much paid during this first application period. It's going to be another period starting in February. You should just know, here's the portal to apply. Lendistry is some kind of administrator for this, and there's more information on Cal's website there. Now, these commercial tenant eviction moratoriums, again, these are counties, so you have to look at your specific county to see what terms they have. But you should know that many have put these moratoriums in places that basically say, landlords, I'm sorry, people can't pay you right now, but you can't kick them out because, of COVID. So what you should know is that this normally the commercial tenant is in kind of a disadvantage, because if you're not paying your rent, there's kind of a summary quick eviction process that landlords get with the courts. They can both evict you and sue you for damages. But now the courts are pretty much closed to the landlords. And so it's changed the kind of power that you can bring to a negotiation, because most landlords, looking at a landscape where there's lots of shuttered businesses and such, they're saying to themselves, maybe it's better to take a chance on this person who has been paying and try and give them some terms so that then they'll be able to stick around and catch up and stuff like that. So what we've been seeing, and again, this is information from landlord attorneys that we've talked to, most landlords are in a situation right now where they say to themselves, it's riskier. First, the courts aren't going to hear my cases for months and months, maybe years. So do I want my place, do I want to try and kick these people out, intimidate them, make them go, and then have nothing? Probably better to see what they could pay in order to stick around once the pandemic is over. Maybe people can get back to better arrangements. So just know that we have this new commercial lease mediation service that we are offering, and that's for folks who have talked to their landlords and those landlords are willing to participate in that. Now, if you need an attorney just to represent you in a negotiation to fend off a lawsuit, unfortunately we don't have that, but we are making referrals to local attorneys who have that ability, but that would be for pay. The mediation services are for free. All right, well, those are the main things, sort of pandemic related stuff, programs you should know about. Here's some other legal updates that you should know about. Of course, the governor's mandate is that we all wear masks in public. Would love to see more of that, seeing myself being somebody over 60. But that also means that if you are doing a public business and you are interfacing with customers, yeah, your workers and employees need to be wearing masks out there. So let's see, a few other things. Now employers, it's funny, what it used to be was somebody got COVID, you'd sort of worry, gee, this is information about somebody's health. I shouldn't be, disclosing it to my other workers. Well, no, now it's really the other way around. You have to inform employees within 24 hours if another employee is COVID positive. And my understanding is that since they have to assess whether they've been exposed or not, you have to tell them who got the COVID too. So that's a big change there. Let's see, a couple other things. California minimum wage now for 25 or more. Excuse me, if up to 25, no, excuse me, sorry. If more than 25 employees, $14 an hour. If 25 employees or less, it's $13 an hour. Now, in calculating those numbers of your workplace, you don't include independent contractors. It's just how many employees are in the workplace there. Paid family leave is now extended to 8 weeks in a 12-month period, and number more people can be the reason that you're taking the leave for. So grandparents, grandchildren, siblings. You should know that the California Family Rights Act is now basically the same as the Federal Family Leave Act, which allows up to 12 weeks of leave. Now this is different. This is, first was talking about paid leave. This is now 12 weeks of leave to care for domestic partners and these additional family there. Here's a few things. Food facility workers are now encouraged to go and wash their hands on a regular basis. Little rocket science to that. But they need to be able to leave their station every 30 minutes to wash their hands, and even do it more often if they need to, of course. Job discrimination cases are more tightly, scrutinized. So for example, you're advertising a position. Yeah, watch if you're seeming to exclude people over age 40, that's going to be looked at more carefully now. Similarly, pre-employment inquiries about people's religion. I mean, generally you shouldn't be asking people about their religion, or age or medical conditions. That's subject to much more scrutiny. It's got to be very tied to the job. Okay, well, yeah, you can ask people about their age if they're a bartender. That makes sense. Okay. Medical conditions, do they have a bad back? If they have to lift a lot of stuff, that's okay. But just asking them generally to disclose their medical histories is not going to be allowed. Employee discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity has been found to be unlawful by the U.S. Supreme Court. So that's going to be something. California was already very strong on that, but just so you know. Temporary or seasonal workers now have to participate in sexual harassment training just like other workers. And here's another one, sadly, workplace safety plans. So, plans you have for, diminishing infection and protecting your employees and stuff. Those plans also need to account now for COVID-19 violence. People who come into your store and get violent when you ask them to wear a mask. Sad to say, but got a plan for those situations now. All right, well, those were the legal updates for 2021. Do include some questions in the chat if you have other questions about that. But why don't we move on now to entity formation, okay? How to start a for-profit business. Okay, well, first I'd ask, might ask, well, why form a legal entity there? I mean, it's so easy. You can just do your own taxes and right now, if you're a sole proprietor, what you do is you do your 1040 and then you do a Schedule C at tax time that captures your costs of doing business. You probably also do a Form SE for your self-employment tax. So, maybe you're used to doing that right now. Well, there's a couple other reasons that it might make sense now, especially now, to form a legal entity, particularly because of liability. That's always been an issue because the more separation that you can create between you and your business means that if something goes wrong, they'll be suing the business and not you. But we'll go into that a little bit more later, how that works. And there are potentially some tax benefits of creating that entity. We'll go into that a little bit too. But probably some of the more important ones right now are, when you have a legal entity, that means that somebody can actually invest in you. Okay, that means also that you can take on, in the name of the business, a loan instead of you personally taking on that loan. Now, many lenders do require a personal guarantee, so it doesn't make any difference if you try to contract with your business. But some loans can be unpersonal and connected only to your business, and that means that if you default, then it's the business that people turn to for repayment and not you. All right. Now, here's probably one of the most important reasons right now, if you're a sole proprietor, to form a legal entity is because of AB 5. You probably heard about this law that has affected so much in the state of California. In many ways, AB 5 has changed the game for people who do contracted work because it's made the people who hire contractors sort of very, very worried about whether they are hiring people who later will come back and say, look, you misclassified me. You should have fired me as an employee. I've got overtime you didn't pay me for. You didn't pay the employer's share of FICA for me. You should have done that. So you should know that AB 5 is a big reason right now to form a legal entity. And why is that? It's because then you can qualify for this thing called the B2B exception or business to business exception. And you can contract with another business to provide them service, and they don't have to worry about you being misclassified because it comes under this what's called independent business B2B exception for AB 5. All right, and we'll go into that a little bit more in the future, but this is one big reason to do this right now. Now, for folks who may not have a right to work in the US, this also is a really big reason to form a legal entity, is because then you can earn profits from ownership of the business. Anybody can own a business. I mean, Donald Trump owns all kinds of businesses in Dubai, and he's not a citizen of Dubai. So you should know it's the same thing in the US here. You earn profits from a business. You don't have to have a green card. You don't have to have work authorization. Don't have to do an I-9. So this is a very good reason to for anybody who doesn't have who's undocumented to form a legal entity. Okay, and then also increases some credibility if you have somebody showing up at your house to do build you a deck or doing something like that, and you can see on the side of the truck it says Pfeiffer and Sons LLC or Pfeiffer and Sons Incorporated. That has a little more credibility than just I'm John Pfeiffer. I'm here to do your deck. So again, legal entities, as I will point out, very easy to form, not that hard to maintain, and you've got several options for how you do it. So let's get into that a little bit. The different options, you probably heard about these. Sole proprietorship. I mean, if you haven't actually formed anything yet, you're probably considered to be a sole proprietorship right now. Partnerships, there's several kinds of those. There's like a limited partnership, a general partnership. Corporations, there's several kinds of those too. There's like a social purpose corporation, there's a for-profit corporation, there's a non-profit corporation. There's an S corporation and a C corporation. We'll go through each of these in a little bit. And then there's LLCs. There's a couple of kinds of those too. There's a manager-managed LLC and a multi-member LLC. We'll go into those in just a few minutes, but just very important to know, if you don't make a choice as to your entity, then if you're a single or married person, then you will be deemed to be a partner, a sole proprietorship. Whereas if you're two or more people who aren't married working on this together, then you're going to be deemed to be a partnership by the law. Now, why is this important? It's because there are legal presumptions that go with these different statuses, and neither here are what you call a limited liability entity. That means neither of these entities has a liability shield that will protect you in the state in the case of a lawsuit. We'll go into more detail about that, but it essentially means that everything is on the line for you. If you are a sole proprietor or a partner in a partnership, everything is on the line. Anybody who sues you for as a sole proprietor or as a partner in a partnership, your house, your car, your savings, everything is on the line. Okay, that's why you get a bunch of insurance. But once the insurance runs out, if you didn't get enough, you're on the line for the rest. Sad to say. Okay, well, how do you choose this entity? What's not important is what's easiest to form, what are the lowest filing fees, what are the least paperwork. This is a very easy thing to do that we'll show you how to do for essentially less than $100. Okay. What is important are these 4 questions to the left here. Okay. Who's going to be making decisions for my business? How should my income be taxed? Do I need this legal liability backstop, this shield to protect myself? And do I need a vessel for capital providers to pay into? So here are the answers, or the basic answers for these important questions. Or I guess I should say, I shouldn't say answers. I should say these are the sort of bottom line questions you need for each of these. So in governance, will you be sharing governance with others? Do you need some kind of like formal structure, like a board that will then make decisions and then guide the day-to-day people doing the work? That's probably the first question is, do you need some kind of shared governance structure, or are you going to be making all of the decisions yourself? Okay, tax. Should the entity itself pay tax? Or should it just report the income that it earns and pass it through to the owners of the business, who then pay the tax due on their tax returns? That's a choice that you have, and we'll tell you a little bit more how that works in a second. All right, here's another one. And this is one maybe you've all heard about, and that is, do I need to create this separation from the business's obligation? Am I willing to pay this $800 minimum franchise tax on an annual basis to California to get this liability shield? All right. And finally, with capital, will the business be seeking venture capital in the next couple of years? If so, then maybe a different kind of entity will work for you, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. Okay, so those are the questions for you to think about. Let's go through these one at a time, okay? So in terms of governance, you could have one entrepreneur or a couple on the head, several entrepreneurs, okay, and you could possibly organize the several entrepreneurs into kind of a board of directors if you want that. These are sort of your options here. But here are kind of the shared governance arrangements you would think about. So in a corporation, you would have this hierarchical situation where the shareholders of the corporation, the owners of the corporation, would elect a board of directors to sort of guide the organization going forward. And the organization would then, hire through the board of directors, CEO or other employees. Maybe the CEO hires the rest of the employees. And it's a very hierarchical structure. Ultimately the board answers to the shareholders can remove the board. Board of directors doesn't tend to be involved on the day-to-day basis. It tends to be the people they hire to run the corporation there. And so, this is a structure that has to be maintained in terms of formalities. The board has to get together on a regular basis and make decisions and do minutes to keep track of what decisions they've made and show how careful they've been in making those decisions. So I guess I would say it's not for folks who don't want to devote the time to that. Because you should know that if you don't maintain these formalities, then a court is going to question whether you should have your liability shield or not. Okay, LLCs are a little more flexible, okay? The LLCs are developed through an agreement between the members of the LLC. And basically in that agreement, they work out these 3 big terms, which is, how do we make decisions together? That's the governance part. How do we start the business off? Do we contribute capital to the business at the beginning? Okay, maybe everybody puts in $1,000 or something like that. And then what are our profit shares going forward? And what happens, the reason I draw a little triangle here is that it appears that oftentimes, people think these factors are related to each other. So they say, okay, well, there's a 3-person LLC, three members of the LLC, will each put in the same amount of capital at the beginning, $100, And so we'll each take the same profit share, 1/3, and we'll each have a 1/3 vote for the governance. But you should know that it's flexible. You can change this as wherever you want. Let's say one of those members doesn't have a lot of money, but they have a lot of expertise. What about if they don't contribute any capital at the beginning, but they still get the same profit share? Or maybe in governance, maybe one of you is like an accountant and another one is a marketer. And then you could say, well, when decisions come down to accounting or finance planning, maybe the accountant has the lead decision on that. And maybe if there's a marketing decision, maybe the marketer should have the lead decision-making power on that. So the thing about LLCs is that they have, in contrast to the corporation, it's a flexible kind of arrangement. You can set this all up in your operating agreement. We have templates that can set that up for you. And there aren't these required meetings. They aren't these, having to have minutes and everything like that a corporation does in order to maintain its shield. So what we tend to say is that unless you're really into the formalities and like doing Robert's Rules of Order or something like that with majority rule votes on your board of directors, consider the LLC, because starting up a business, there's enough to worry about besides trying to maintain your entity, and the LLC is a relatively easy one to maintain. Okay, well, taxation, we were talking about this. This is a second factor. So this is how a corporation does it, okay? You get your income coming in there in the red box there. It flows through to the entity. The entity itself reports the income on their tax return and also pays taxes on the net profits through its tax return, okay? But then if it wants to distribute profits to the owners, then the owners also pay tax on that distribution of income, and they have to report that on their tax returns. It's usually a lower rate of tax. It's a dividend tax rate of about 15%. But as you can tell, this is what we call double taxation. More tax is taken out of the income using this arrangement here, okay? And this is what you would do if you formed a corporation and it was what was called a C corporation, subchapter C corporation. This is how the tax structure works for that, okay? Now, instead, you might do a pass-through taxation arrangement. Here, the income that comes in simply goes to the entity, and the entity reports the income to the IRS and the state, but then it passes all of it through to the owners, and then the owners pay tax according to their individual tax brackets on the profits that they receive. Now, one thing you should just note here is that all profits are presumed to pass through. So even if the owner says, oh, I don't want to take a draw this year, they will still be taxed on that draw. It's a presumption that it goes through that you can't rebut, okay? So that's the way that goes. Now, no taxation is certainly what everybody would like, but that's only for nonprofits. So that just means income would go to the entity. Entity reports the amount to the IRS and the feds, and as long as they've applied for tax exempt status, then they don't pay tax on it. Again, no profit sharing here. You can't have a nonprofit with shareholders or stuff. If the nonprofit is making income from other activities not related to its tax exempt purposes, like charitable or educational purposes, then they still have to pay tax on that. But again, I should point out, even forming a nonprofit corporation doesn't mean you are immune from that $800 franchise tax. You still have to apply for tax exempt status. So, and by the way, I should mention, we have a regular nonprofit academy that we do every 2 months. So if you're interested in forming a nonprofit, we can coach you through the application process, forming that nonprofit corporation and applying for tax exempt status. So just send me an email if you're interested in getting in on the next academy there. All right, well, now we're into limiting liability. Do you need the shield of limited liability? Well, I already, maybe scared you a little bit about the fact that, your personal assets are on the line if you don't have a limited liability shield. So what would happen in this situation, let's say your company has a delivery truck, it runs over somebody who could be liable in this situation. If you don't have limited liability, not only the business could be liable, in both cases, the business could be liable, and that's why you'd have an insurance policy, okay? Interestingly, you should note the driver is always on the hook here. Why is that? Because they were driving and it was potentially their negligence that caused the accident here. Okay, so the driver is always on the hook there. But if you don't have a limited liability shield, if you're not an LLC or a corporation, the owners of this business are also personally liable for what could happen here. And any, the founders, and then anybody who has a share, ownership share of this entity will also be on the hook there. Okay, so if you form this limited liability shield by forming either an LLC or a corporation, there are still some exceptions to it. So as I mentioned, if you go for a loan and the bank says, well, you got to sign off on it personally, even though you're an LLC owner or a corporate owner, that personal guarantee won't, that means that your shield won't protect you against that, something you took on personally like that. Let me see. Personal negligence, this is an important aspect. Let's say that you were a masseuse and you were working with somebody's body here and you didn't bother to find out that their shoulder had just been reset by in surgery, and you went at that hammer and tongs and re-injured the shoulder. Well, that's probably your negligence. That's probably you doing something you should have been more careful about. That is not going to be protected by this limited liability shield. Again, insurance is the only way to cover that. And by the way, you should know, if you're doing personal stuff like me, I'm advising people on the law, or a doctor giving medical advice, you might want to get a policy that protects you against basically professional negligence. That's like malpractice or stuff. It's called errors and omissions insurance, or E&O. Normally you'd get commercial liability, general liability insurance to just protect the business. That's what you'd do in this case here, whether you were a limited liability entity or not. But something that you are individually could be held responsible for, your own negligence, get an E&O policy as well. Okay, so there's a few things here that mean that your shield might come down, but generally this would be an important sort of backstop for liability. If somebody sued you in this situation, all they could take was what was in the coffers of the entity. Okay, finally, capitalization. Why do you need capitalization? Well, to pay for startup costs, you have some ongoing expenses. Maybe your revenue doesn't cover. Maybe you need to improve your building. Maybe you need to put in barriers because of COVID or something like that. Well, and where do you get it? Well, maybe the founders are putting that money in, family, friends, banks, creditors, people who invest in you, maybe some grant agencies who would give you money, maybe government contracts. You get them from a bunch of different sources, but you're always looking for a balance between, what you put in. You can't bankrupt yourself, but good thing about that is you don't have to pay yourself back if you fail. Debt. Okay, well, here you don't have to give up any control to get a loan. The bank's not going to control your day-to-day stuff, but you do have to pay it back, even if you go belly up. But equity, here you go. You might need to give up some control to these people who are giving you investment. Maybe they need to elect one of your board members or something like that. But you don't have to pay it back if you fail. So those are the balancing act that you're doing with capitalization. And I'll mention one more thing, which is in a few minutes, I'll mention, if you do see that you're going to go for something called venture capital in the future, here you go. Here's a good overview of that. So think of time here. So go back to the left side here where you're just starting maybe. Founders are putting in their own money. They may get some money from friends, family, maybe an angel who's just like a local investor who believes in you, is not looking for a big profit there, not looking to control you. And then maybe you take on some debt. Well, in that situation, you could try any of these kinds of entities here. That would be fine, okay? But then if you're going for something called venture capital, which is essentially stranger capital, meaning they don't give a hoot what you're doing. They don't give a hoot about where you are or what stage you are. They just want to know that if they put in $1 in like 3 years, they're going to get back 20, okay? And so they're going to want to control a lot of what you're doing to make sure you get that 20 for them from their $1 investment. So just know that once your venture capital comes in, they're going to want to see you in a corporation. And that means that eventually you could even become a public corporation and do an IPO. Maybe you heard about this, but essentially, if you are in this pink area here, I'm showing you there, you should know that it's actually very easy to find an attorney to help you with all this stuff because the venture capitalists will probably pay them, that attorney, for you. On the left-hand side here, in the blue and the green area, hard to pay an attorney to help you do all the right legal decisions during this period of time. That's why we're trying to help close the gap on that. But just know that, that's the hardest time. This is where, most businesses fail within, 5 years, 50% do. So anyway, this is sort of the typical capitalization there. Now, if you are headed for venture capital and you think you're going to need that in the next couple of years, well, then maybe we'll talk about forming you in Delaware, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. So as I said, capitalization, the options, all entities work well with founders' contributions, debt, or friends and family. With equity funding, then people want to invest in you, but they want to be able to get some extra perks. Okay, they would want this decision-making power, or they'd want to be able to, if you close down, they're going to want a multiplier of the investment money they put in. So if they put in $10,000, they're going to want a multiple of, 1.5. They get back 15 if you close down, you see. But you see, they want a majority rule kind of entity so that they can control it with only a 51% share. And that's why LLCs, are good vehicles for sort of local private investment, but not so much for these venture capitalists they don't like the fact that the LLCs or the partnerships are bound by agreement and everyone has to agree on new investment, okay? They're going to want a corporation where majority rules and they can take over with just 51%. Okay. So those are some of the considerations there. Here are some of the most common legal entities. Let me move my little screen here so that it doesn't get in the way. Here we go. I think you can see most of that there. All right, so here we go. Corporations, nonprofit or for-profit, they're governed by a board. Tax is usually, again, this entity level taxation. That means that for-profits, they pay the tax, they report the tax to the IRS, they pay the $800 minimum franchise tax. Fortunately, they get a break on that in the first year. Okay, that's always good. And then if you're a nonprofit, of course, you don't have to pay tax if you obtain this tax exemption. You get the limited liability shield, and it works basically with any kind of capitalization. Nonprofits, of course, they don't get equity, they don't do profit shares or stuff. LLCs, here you go. The entrepreneurs make the decisions. They could appoint a manager, so using a manager-managed LLC arrangement to manage the day-to-day operations, and keep some people more in a passive investing role. But again, you can set it up pretty much however you want. Tax is a pass-through taxation. There is this gross receipts tax if you're over 250K, and there is the 800-year franchise tax, which, by the way, big legal change, LLCs don't have to pay in the first year anymore. Hooray, hooray. So that's an important thing. And then you should note that active owners also have to pay self-employment tax because they're not employed by anybody, you see. Limited liability shield, there you go. Works pretty well with most kinds of capital, but probably not venture capital there. And then sole proprietor partnership. I mean, if you're a sole proprietor partnership, you already know how this works. It's all passed through. You make your own decisions. You don't have the shield, and it's a little hard to capitalize this thing. All right, now as you should know, there are a couple of more less common entities, so maybe you've heard about this. So a social purpose corporation or a benefit corporation is essentially a corporation that has a second bottom line. So if you look at this, again, I'm going to give you this chart and everything so you have all this information going forward. But you should know that the social purpose corporation essentially has baked into its corporate documents another mission. So like to help fight climate change, or maybe it diverts some of its profits to homeless shelters or something like that. Well, you want to put that in your formative documents so that then an investor can't come along later and say, gee, wait a minute, you just gave some of those profits to the homeless shelter. That should have gone to me. Instead, you say, Well, you signed on to the social purpose corporation that said part of our mission is to help homeless shelters. So, suck it, basically. Um, anyway, so just know that you want to set this up carefully. The benefit corporation, the difference is that the social purpose corporation merely says at the end of the year, we will assess how we've done to meet our social mission. On the benefit corporation side, they hire a third party, which is an organization often called B Lab, or you can hire somebody else to assess how they did meeting their social goals. Okay, but you could do either one of those. S corporation, this is something that we think of as kind of a fragile corporation, but the benefit of it is that you get a limited liability shield like an LLC, but you also have a corporate form that has pass-through taxation, okay? So this is like an LLC, but you can only certain people and arrangements can be made with this S Corp. For example, all the investors in an S Corp have to be human. You can't have an entity investing in it. All those humans have to have legal status in the US. They have to have a green card or citizenship. And why is that important? Well, if let's say you're a shareholder in this S Corp and your wife happens to not have status and you get hit by a bus, suddenly there's an S corporation shareholder who's not a legal, doesn't have legal status, then it blows the S corporation status for that year, and you're suddenly now a C corp that pays entity level, corporate tax. So, that's a real problem. So let's see a few other things. S corps, another thing that investors don't like about them is that you can only have one type of stock. You can have only one set of economic benefits for the stock. You can't like say this person gets, different dividends than another person does. And some investors, because they feel like they're taking an extra risk, want some special perks like this. Okay. All right, so those are some things of the S Corp. If you want to know about how to do one of those, that's, we can help you figure that out. Essentially, at the beginning of your fiscal year, you have to elect this status within, I think it's about 2 months. Otherwise, you're presumed to be a C Corp. Okay, finally, there's these cooperatives. Cooperatives you've heard about. Now, the main distinction about the cooperatives is that there's really very little passive investment. That just means everybody's working in it and everybody's an owner. And so you can set this up either through an LLC or this thing called a cooperative corporation. Either one, we could show you how to do it, but also cooperatives tend to have what we would call democratic, sort of everybody gets the same vote according to the amount of patronage or work that they're doing. And so it's kind of a democratic institution that you'd want to do. More decision-making by consensus there. So here's the thing, hopefully if you're online, you've seen the recording, you can focus on this. This has everything in it about the 4 factors plus how to form your entity down at the bottom here. Let me move this around so you can see it. Okay, go back up here. Okay, so that's how you form each of these different entities here. Okay, and if you have some questions, feel free to ask at the chat after this is over, Q&A, or contact us. Okay. All right, last couple of things. Where to form this entity? Okay. If you're doing business in California, you should probably form in California because the problem is if you form somewhere else trying to evade California's taxes, sorry, if you're doing some business in California, you're going to have to register in California and you're going to have to pay this minimum franchise tax in your second year, no matter what. So it really doesn't make that much difference if you form in another place, because actually if you form in another place, you're going to be paying their fees too. And like in Delaware, where many people form, if they are going for venture capital, then you're going to be paying Delaware franchise taxes and California franchise taxes. You're going to have attorneys that know the law in both areas. It's kind of expensive. But if venture capitalists want, they like Delaware because it's corporate law that they really understand is applied very consistently by business judges there, business court judges. So, they like you in Delaware if you're going to go for venture capital. So just know that those are sort of the trade-offs about where to form. All right, so so this is a little bit about what you do if you want to form in Delaware. There's, this is the minimum tax, taxes, and then there's an agent for service of process. Usually have to pay for $150 annually because nobody lives in Delaware. And now another thing you might ask is, well, what if I got big? What if I started something here and it got big and it got the interest of venture capital? Well, gee, you can always reincorporate in another state. That's not very difficult. The way you do it is you simply form, like if you start in California and you wanted to do in Delaware, then you'd form another entity in Delaware. You would then transfer some of your assets from the existing corporation to capitalize that new entity, or maybe you then close down the other entity and you remain a Delaware entity. It's fairly easy to do this. Just know that if you are transferring anything that has become appreciated in value, like land or IP or something like that, then the IRS, once you transfer it to the new entity, is going to want some tax on that. Okay, so do it. So definitely check with a tax accountant on that. All right, so final thoughts. You have to balance your pluses, minuses, these different factors. There's no sort of perfect entity for you out there. Don't worry about the filing process. That's something that is very easy to do. Again, $100 will form your entity for you. The franchise tax here is something that people pay attention. I was really sad to hear from somebody the other day who said, gee, I formed my LLC on December 10th. Oh, you formed your LLC December 10th, 2020. Not only did that mean that you now owe franchise taxes for 2020 because you're an LLC and they didn't get a break in the first year, but now in 2021, you're going to have to pay another $800 a year franchise tax because now that's your second year and you don't get the second year break. If you'd waited from December 10th to January 1st, you would not have owed $1,600 at all. I just felt so bad telling that person that. It's virtually impossible to sort of walk that back, I'm afraid. So just know that if you're interested in forming your LLC in the next year or corporation, don't do it in the last month or something like that. Don't do it in the last couple of months because it's not prorated. It's going to be for the entire year if you form. Okay, well, I think that's pretty much what I got. Here's our links for our website for services. Look for our online legal library for information that would be helpful for you. And then, oops, sorry, go back. And then the website for services, again, www.law.berkeley.edu/MBCLC to sign up for those office hours every week, 11 to 2, Monday, Wednesday, or sign up with Sandra for the next third Friday session. And you can find us some office hours that'll be available for that. And then to email us, just use that newbusinesslaw@law.berkeley.edu. Okay, everybody, let's stop the share and let's start some questions. Let me go to the chat, see what we got. Okay, let's see, what do we got? How difficult is it to change from C Corp to an LLC? Yeah, as I said, not very difficult there at all. Good question. Let's see, the main thing, as I said, is you create the LLC, you capitalize it with some money from the C Corp. You take the assets of the C Corp and put it into the LLC. And then you can close your C Corp. The exception is that if the C Corp still has some outstanding obligations, like on a contract, or maybe there's a lawsuit pending for something like that, you won't be able to close that C Corp until you've satisfied those obligations there. Yeah, but it's, no extra cost to do it. It's just, as though you started forming an LLC in the first place, which is $70. Okay, and you file that online in the state of California. So that's that Bulldog Korean Fusion. Did you have any follow-up on that? No? Okay. If an LLC is formed in New Mexico, should we pay tax in both New Mexico and California if it is formed there? Yes, you see, if you're doing any business in California, and the standard is really, is any of your sort of brain of the organization here? If you're basically, the leadership is all in New Mexico, okay, but you're just like you got maybe an office here where you're selling some stuff, then um, you might have an argument that your presence in California is minimal. You shouldn't have to register. You shouldn't have to pay any taxes here. But generally, California, if you really are doing any significant business here, they're going to want to have you register and pay that franchise tax every year. Although, again, if you did form in New Mexico, in your first year of registration in California, you'd get the franchise tax waived. Okay. Let's see, other questions. Oh, looks like we're at the end of our questions. Okay, let's try some live questions. If anybody wants to, unmute themselves and ask, or raise your hand, it's using the raise hand function. Go ahead, guys. Anybody? Let me see if I see anybody with waved hands.
So while participants join in with their questions, there's one question that I always get asked here with startup businesses, and it's at what point should I obtain my EIN number, which is the employer identification number for the business, if we don't have employees?
Well, that EIN is actually important for other things, like if you're applying for a SBA loan or something, they're going to want an EIN for that. So I would say virtually get it at the beginning, anytime you're doing stuff. Now, remember, you can get a different kind of number if you can get an EIN if you don't have a social security card or something like that. You use a tax ID number instead. So just know that you can still get this important government number that designates your entity, even if you're undocumented. Ask us if you have a question on how to do that. But yes, I would tend to say EIN, basically as soon as you start your business, you should have an EIN. It's free and apply online.
And how about how about online businesses that are operating from home and they're using e-commerce platforms to sell or resell products or handmade products? Should they be getting a business permit just at the local level, or how does that if they're going to be shipping to another state, for example? I know it gets
good question. So online businesses, a few things. The county or city local is going to want to know that you're in business. So still apply for, and by the way, you should know there's two kinds of forms sort of locally to think about. One's often called a doing business as form, or a fictitious business name form, or DBA, something like that. That's simply letting the local government know who you are, you're in business, this is how you contact us. But sometimes counties or cities want you to also pay like a license tax of some sort, which would be either a set fee or a percentage of your income. So that's what's called a business license. And so you have to apply for both of these things. Okay. And if you're working at home, normally they're going to want you to get some kind of home business use permit as well. Again, it might have a little fee to it. Just know that home businesses do have a little bit of regulation to worry about because, like, let's say they're a therapist's office or something like that. They do that out of their home. They don't want like you to park up all of the spaces available on your street for your customers. So you have to pay a little bit of attention to not having impacts on your neighbors that they'll tell you about. So there's that. Now, as to what you have to do tax-wise or registration-wise, let's see, I don't believe you'd have to register in other states that you do, like you sell, let's say you sell cosmetics to somebody in New York. No, you don't have to register in New York like you would if you had some presence there. However, you may need to collect sales taxes. That's one of the key things. Right now, I would, if you sell anything, you're going to need a sales permit. So you go to the Department of, what's it called? Administration and Finance, I believe it is. It used to be called the Equalization Board in California. So you go to there, get your sales permit. They will tell you how you have to collect taxes from other states or not. Right? But I guess what I would say is if you regularly are selling to some states, it's going to be more likely that you'll have to collect sales tax there. If you just have like a random sale to Arkansas, probably don't need to, pay those sales taxes.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Bill. It's always a pleasure. And I want to
Sure.
remind our participants that these legal webinars are taking place every third Friday of the month. So since we still have you connected, feel free to send us in the chat box topics that you would like to see for the early spring of 2021. And as a reminder, our next webinar, legal webinar, will be February 19, same time, same location. I see here that we have Veronica who has a question. So Veronica,
Oh,
please.
one more question. Okay, yeah, please. Let's see. Oh, who has a question? Go ahead. Go ahead and unmute. No? Was it, did you say it was Veronica or no? Who was it?
Yeah, I believe you're able to unmute yourself. Or you can
Veronica, yeah. Okay. Well, feel free to follow up with an email question. That's fine too. Yeah, here's in the chat, here's the website or the email, newbusinesslaw@law.berkeley.edu. Yeah.
Perfect. And then it looks like e-commerce. We got a comment here. More information on e-business would be great. So I know that's, with the pandemic continuing,
Mhm.
finding brick and mortar, it's industry
Mhm.
that's, a lot of transition into e-commerce platforms, catering to the demand of the customer and also the flexibility of making, those business sales happen. So maybe topic for February. So
Yeah, actually, that would be a good topic. So maybe we'll focus on e-commerce, how to handle the legal aspects of e-commerce. Let's do that for February.
Perfect. Well, I will like to continue by saying that these are some of our upcoming webinars for the month of January, and we are building our webinar lineup for the month of February. So we will definitely take your feedback into consideration. And next week on January 21st, we will be having a topic on in regards to credit, and this is pertaining to personal credit as well as business credit. So differentiating the two of them, and also the importance of how to read a credit report and making sure that the information there is correct. And if there is anything that needs to be changed, how to take the initiative to go ahead and do so. So providing you the tools to make that happen. And we will also be joined on January 27. We will be continuing our Negociantes Unidos breakfast meetings. And we have the honor of having City of Mayor recently elected Mayor Jerry Dyer as our keynote speaker. So these invitations open to you. You can check out our website to sign up. We will also be sharing with everyone via email, and everyone will be receiving a copy of today's webinar. For more information, please contact the Fresno Area Hispanic Foundation at 222-8705, and also visit our website for more information. And you can also check us out on our social medias and visit our YouTube account so that you can catch today's recording and also previous recordings as well. Thank you, everybody. Pleasure to connect with each one of you. Happy New Year, and I hope you are staying safe and healthy. Have a great weekend.
Okay. Best wishes, everybody. Stay safe. Bye-bye.